when was it, the last time most people probably saw you, most fans would have seen you, was Valencia 2022, and that sort of emotional farewell for Suzuki, with Rins winning. I mean, what happened next for you, Livio? I mean, what happened last year? Are you still involved with Suzuki in any way?
Well, that's basically last year. Myself and Roberto Brivio mainly were involved in trying to sell all the stuff of the team, because for administration reason, everything was related to Suzuki Italy. Because the workshop was in Italy, close to Milan. Yeah. So all the trucks and the crates and everything was in the bills of Suzuki Italy. So we basically, Roberto did a great job. We sold basically everything. And so this unfortunately was my second year in Suzuki. Instead of trying to build something good, trying to sell as good as possible all the stuff.
I mean, just on that, would you have taken the role if you knew it was only going to be 1 year at the racetrack?
Difficult to say. I mean, the only condition I put when I signed with Sahara-san was 1 year contract is not enough for me. Suzuki usually used to do 1 year contract to everybody. Then in the recent season, they start doing 2 years, also to the mechanics and stuff, same as for the riders. Of course, last year, all the riders were ending their contract, and therefore also all the staff, except myself. But, when I signed for them, basically Suzuki announced a few months before that they just renewed the contract with Dorna for 5 more years. So it was very difficult at the beginning of 2022 to predict that after a few months they would have changed mind, Anyway.
I mean, do you think
it's been a great experience. I realized that, like it or not, this is my work. I like it. I love to work in MotoGP. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's nothing going on, but you never know.
I mean, is there anything that could have been done, do you think, to keep Suzuki in MotoGP? I'm sure there must have been a lot of phone calls going back and forth between the team and Japan. And, should MotoGP be worried that other factories might follow that route out?
Well, there was nothing at least we were not able, myself, Sahara-san, Ken, I mean, the top guys on track, we had no chance to convince them. We tried hard, but there was no chance to convince them to remain. Even reducing the budget and trying to, make things a little bit cheaper. There was no way. So it means that there was not a money-related decision. Having said that, I don't know if with this world changing so quickly, if any other manufacturer will think sooner or later that MotoGP is not anymore a focus for them.
Before joining Suzuki, of course, you worked with, Casey Stoner, Marc Marquez, two of the most talented riders that we've seen in the modern era. I mean, in what ways were they similar? In what ways were they different to work with for you, would you say?
Very similar in terms of speed and talent, therefore. Totally different in terms of character and, the capability of Marc to be always smiling and having a good relationship with people around him is something special. It's difficult. I don't think there is one day on earth in which Marc didn't laugh. He's always positive, and on the other side, Casey has a more complicated character that probably is the real reason why he decided to quit so quickly, because he was only 27 when he quit. Mm-hmm. Clearly, if racing was such a demanding activity for him in terms of mental stress and not be happy of what he was doing, I totally understand his choice. Of course, it was a pity because his talent was unbelievable, and would have been great to see Marc and Casey together on track, something that we never seen.
And I guess that was your plan, was it, for Repsol Honda, that Marc was obviously the champion of Moto2, looking to move up? And
yeah. Anyway, I think we cannot complain with the team we built up, because the team with Danny and Mark has been anyway a very strong team for a few years.
Lots of big names around at that time as well. Lorenzo, you know, Pedrosa, as you mentioned, Hayden, Dovi. I mean, do you think MotoGP misses some of those big rivalries that were around then?
I think somehow, yes. You know, like it or not, the last 20 or more years of MotoGP has been influenced a lot by the personality of Valentino. Of course, Valentino is impossible to replace. I mean, there will never be again another Valentino. It's like in ski, Alberto Tomba in Italy. We have good skiers, but Alberto Tomba was something special. And at the moment, as Italian, we have several strong riders. I mean, first of all, of course, Pecco, that won the last 2 titles. We had Dovi, we have Bezzecchi, we have Bastianini. We are maybe too much, same as for the Spanish, you know. When on a grid of 22 riders, if I'm not wrong, this season there will be 16 between Italian and Spanish, if I'm not wrong. This is probably one of the biggest problem of MotoGP, to be able to be more international.
I remember Livio, Valencia 2017, we got this message on the Monday after the race. You guys had just won the World Championship, that you were holding a press conference. And we're, what's going on? And of course, you announced you were leaving. Surprised a lot of people, because, you know, you were right on top of the world at that stage. I mean, why did you leave at that moment, Livio? What was...
There's not only one reason, but let's say, for sure, I was, after many years of doing always the same things, I was a little bit full. I needed a break. But on top of that, there was the retirement of Nakamoto-san. Nakamoto-san did the last race, if I well remember, Austin 2017, because he had to go pension. Because in Japan, at 60 years, they go pension. And after his retirement, it was clear to me that the new president, you know, he would have preferred to work with people that he knows before. You know, this is something quite normal in any big company. And basically, I had 1 more year contract with Honda, but I spoke with Nomura-san, at the time was the president, and I said, Nomura-san, I'm 53 at that time. I have more than 20 years experience. If you think I can be useful, I'm more than happy to respect my contract. But if you think you would prefer to do differently, no problem. And so at the end, in Valencia Sunday, he told me, okay, if you prefer to leave, we respect the contract till the end of the contract. So basically 1 more year, but you're free to leave. And I think that for me was the best, because with my character, to remain there without having the power to take any decision was something, just to take the money was something I cannot do.
So as you say, Nakamoto leaving, you leaving, we've seen the problems that Honda's had now. Marc's injuries played a big part in that. But what do you think are the other reasons behind, you know, that Honda's lack of success right now, should we say?
I don't know if we have time enough to speak about it now.
Some of them.
Of course, first of all, it's difficult to speak about problems when you are not involved. No, so I've been involved there since till the end of 2017. In 2018, basically was the same exact team I left with Danny and Marc, and still was a reasonable good season for Danny, even if he was not able to win races. At the end of the season, Danny decided to retire, and I was very surprised when I understood that they didn't offer, or I mean, they didn't find the solution to have him on board as a test rider, because it was clear to everybody that Danny has a great sensibility, and it was clear to everybody in HRC at that time that in the last few years the bike was becoming more and more difficult to ride. Like you well remember some interviews of Cal that was not so nice about the bike, but Danny itself was complaining, not in public but in the technical meeting, that the bike was becoming more and more difficult to ride. Of course, the talent of Marc was a big help. And so probably one of the mistakes was at that time for Honda not to listen at riders like Cal and Danny, and they didn't care too much about the result of the other riders. They just were focused on the Marc winning. And this was probably the biggest mistake. And then when they realized it, that happened basically together with the accident of Marc, it was too late. But that's why I don't think only Jerez 2020 is the main reason why Honda was struggling so much in the last few years. It's a combination of things.
And also, I guess Yamaha, we've seen similar issues recently. I mean, how do the Japanese?
But Yamaha, without an injury of his best rider.
Yes.
You know, and I think the situation between Honda and Yamaha is a little bit different, honestly speaking.
Who do you think is in the better?
Try to find to close the gap in terms of power. They gained something in power, but they lost a lot in rideability. Probably this was the problem of Yamaha in the last few years. And probably another problem of Yamaha is that at the moment with 8 Ducatis on track, it's more and more difficult for Fabio and Franco before, and this season Alex, to try to have a good pace in the race, because we all know that the characteristic of Yamaha has been always to be very fast in the corner, even if a little bit slower in the straight. Probably this gap now is bigger with all the aerodynamics that for sure all the Japanese manufacturers didn't care too much until basically last year. So there's a combination of things that technically put both Honda and Yamaha a little bit in trouble. A little bit in trouble, not a little bit.
You spoke about the European base for Suzuki. Do you think that for the Japanese, it will be more and more important to build up the European side of things, Yamaha and Honda, in terms of perhaps getting European staff in, reacting a bit quicker as far as parts? Is that part of it, do you think, or do you think they can run it all, or a lot of it from Japan?
Well, you know, as I told you before, Suzuki had only a kind of a workshop here. It means a place where you leave the trucks, where you have some spare parts, but it's a logistic workshop. The key point for me is not to have the injuries here in Europe, but the organization of Suzuki was quite good in that terms. It means on track there was a lot of European guys, and the Japanese listen what they were saying. So I think this was the secret of Suzuki, because like it or not, when Suzuki retired, I'm pretty sure we were the strongest Japanese manufacturer. In fact, we won 2 of the last 3 races. So the inline with not so much aerodynamic, anyway, was still able to fight for wins. Of course, Alex is Alex, and he's a very strong rider, but the bike was pretty good. And I think was the key, the secret was the relationship between the European technician in the team and the engineers at home. On this side, Kawauchi-san was doing a good job, Ken, and that's why when they signed him in Honda, I was hoping to see Honda doing something better. Honestly speaking, he's there since Sepang last year, so it's a very short time, and it seems at least that the Valencia test 2023 bike, the one that tested for the first time Luca Marini, seems to be a step ahead. So maybe the job they have done this season is showing something now.
Of course, they're without Marc this year. I mean, we surprised that he left a year early from that, what was it, 4-year contract, and that Honda seemed to make it quite easy for him to leave.
Yeah, I was one of the guys that was saying impossible. It's just something to get something. I was thinking maybe it's a way for Mark and Honda to put pressure on the other manufacturers to get more concession. But in reality, at the end, they got concession and they lost market. I was thinking it was just a way to have more pressure on HRC to do more. But at the end of the day, he did it. So I was totally wrong. And clearly, for Mark to arrive at a point in which you have to close the contract with a company that has been your life, sure wasn't easy, especially on top of this, he had to leave basically all his team crew in HRC, and we all know how strong is the relationship between Mark and Santi and all the other guys. So probably Mark was really too much, after, I think a key point of Mark's decision was Saxon last year.
Right.
In that track, he was able to win with an arm that was still not 100% okay. And last year was trying very hard and got only a lot of crashes. So probably at that point, he said, if I go ahead like this, I will destroy myself. And anyway, there's no chance I can win. So I need to do something immediately.
And that's something, as we know, is Gresini and a year-old Ducati. It sort of reminds me a little bit of right back at the start of the MotoGP era when guys like Max Biaggi just wanted to ride a Honda. No one wanted to ride a factory.
I remember very well because in 2002, for the 2003 season, Max was in the list of riders that we liked. And we were speaking with Loris Capirossi, then at the end was the one that we chose, and Max. And I remember speaking with Claudio Domenicali and Filippo Preziosi, that at that time were my bosses in Ducati Corsa. I say in Loris, I see a lot of motivation because Loris comes from few years he was with Pons with the satellite Honda, and he wants to have a factory ride. While Max, that comes from 4 years, if I'm not wrong, of a factory Yamaha, in his mind, he need a Honda, even if not the factory one, to win races. So he will not have the same motivation of Loris. And I think at the end was the right choice because Loris did a lot at the beginning of the project for Ducati to help and to get the first results was thanks to Loris. The first win in Barcelona, the winter test. You remember when in 1 hour they gave away a car for the fastest lap. He won it. So Loris was a big part of the successful start of Ducati in MotoGP.
And coming back to this year, Mark is the bookies' favorite. The betting companies, they think he's going to be world champion despite after one test basically at Valencia. What do you think?
I'm 100% sure he will be fast, no doubt. But it's also true that he doesn't win races since a couple of years. For sure, all the other riders know the Ducati is much better than him. I don't think the fact that the bike is 1 year old will be a big problem. I see more the problem of knowing much better the bike and the Ducati system. Having said that, the talent of Mark is clear. It's true that he's not anymore the one of a few years ago. But in terms of determination and speed, even in the last 2 years in which he was struggling a lot, if you compare his performances with the one of the other Honda riders, it seems to me that he's still very strong.
And if it all goes well for Mark this year, would you put him alongside Bagnaia at the factory Ducati team? And what happens then for the young guys they've got there, Bezzecchi, Martin? If their path is blocked
for 2025.
Yes, 2025. So yes.
I think, honestly speaking, it's really too early to speak about it because it will depend a lot on how the season will go ahead. I assume that being Bagnaia, a two-time world champion with Ducati, this will be their priority, I believe. To renew Pecco and then see the second place in the factory team who deserved it. But the queue to go there is long because you have Enea that is already there, you have Martin, that I saw an interview in which he said that in 2025 he wants absolutely a factory team. If he's not Ducati, he will move. You have a Bezzecchi that probably deserved, in terms of speed, clearly he deserved a factory bike already in 2024. It was his choice to remain in 146, even if this means he has to stay with the 2023 machine. So these are, in theory, all the Ducati guys that will try to secure for themselves the factory ride, the factory seat. Then, of course, you have Marc, that is potentially could be super strong, and so it will be a quite interesting season to see the place available in who will get it.
And what about your former riders, Suzuki riders, Joan Mir and Alex Rins? I mean, what do you expect from them this season, do you think?
Well, John comes from a disaster season, of course. And honestly speaking, also 2022, comparing with Alex, Rins was below the expectation. So I think the last 2 years, not only 2023, but the last 2 years has been not easy for Joan. He is a world champion, so clearly he has the talent to do a great job. But what was his plus? That was to be maybe not hyper fast. In fact, he won only one race, but at least very constant. In the last 2 years, he lost also that characteristic. So I think it will be a lot up to him to find a good base set up with the new Honda and try to find himself again. With Alex Rins, I'm happy for him because I know that his target was to go back to a factory team. He has been racing in a factory team for all his life in MotoGP with Suzuki. And of course, there's always a difference between a factory team and a satellite team. So I think his motivation will be very high. He has proven, if I'm not wrong, the only inline, because Yamaha didn't win anything this year, right? No.
That's right. Yeah.
No win. The last win of an inline engine is up to Alex. The last 2 wins of an inline instead of before. So sure, he's a fast rider also on that kind of bike. Of course, he proved also in Austin that he can be very fast also on a V4. Austin, he did a kind of miracle. It's difficult to understand how the hell was possible to do it. But anyway, so let's say that on paper, both Fabio and Alex are very strong. It will be a lot up to Yamaha how much they will be able to take advantage of these new rules of concession they have and close the gap with the others.
Another of your former riders was Jack Miller, of course, who signed him for Honda, didn't you, straight from Moto3. I mean, he's now at KTM. Is this the year where KTM finally fights for the title, do you think, Livio?
Well, I love Jack. I love his character and his way of approaching racing. But since his time in Ducati has been always up and down. So forget about KTM. Jack has been up and down also when he was a factory rider in Ducati. So first of all, therefore, is the bike that means something to fight for the championship or Jack? At the moment, I would say more Jack, because he has been in factory Ducati bike that was the most competitive bike and he didn't win. So with all respect for him, I think he still needs to do a step. Probably last year he has been influenced also by the arrival of the baby. That for sure is not easy. I mean, it's something that changes your life. But I really hope to see him fighting with more regularity for the podium. KTM, for sure, Brad Binder is, in my opinion, a very, very strong rider. In fact, he's the first non-Ducati rider in last year's championship.
Yes.
Sometimes a little bit too much aggressive, but for sure, he's a great talent. and we know KTM, whatever they do, they try to do at their best, and whenever with any kind of competition they have done, sooner or later they have won it, from the Supercross to the Dakar to, you know. So I think it would be just a question of time to have a KTM strong enough, and because, you know, one thing is the bike, one thing you have to also have good riders. And again, Ducati in this moment, having 8 bikes on track has a big advantage, not only because they can share the data, but because you can count on 8 different riders. So, you know, you have, even if you race every week and you have one rider more than the day of the week to be in a good day, you know. I think at the moment it will be difficult to beat Ducati for all these things, but it's also true that also KTM and Aprilia have less than Yamaha and Honda some concession. So we see.
You mentioned young talents and things. You signed, you know, Casey in his second year, Marc as a rookie. Pedro Acosta is the new guy coming up this year. I mean, from your point of view, how good do you think he is? What's his potential, do you think?
If you look at the past, he is a potential super champion, because he has won 2 championships in 3 years. The Moto3 championship at his debut. That is something that neither Valentino Rossi was able to do. On the other side, actually MotoGP is a little bit different than in the past. The bike probably is more important than it was in the past, because with all the aerodynamics and the device, there's less room for the riders to just take advantage of their own talent. Having said that, I believe that if he can manage the pressure, and because for sure he will have a lot of pressure, if he can manage the pressure, his talent is one of the talent that is a big one. This is clear to everybody, I think.
Just finally on MotoGP, Livio, I mean, you've seen the sport from the inside and the outside the last couple of years. What do you think of let's say the show or the spectacle of MotoGP? The sprint races came in, of course, things like that, but we hear riders sometimes complain about overtaking. What do you make of it at the moment, overall, looking on the sport?
It's a difficult question. I think, honestly speaking, since the announcement of the sprint race, I was not happy, because in my opinion, we are losing the sense of reality in terms of effort for the teams, and especially the riders, to do all these competitions. And next year they will have 22 rounds. It means 44 races. And like it or not, even if it's half distance, a race is a race. So the stress for the team and the riders to do one more race instead of an FP4 is different. Then the aerodynamic for sure has more and more a big effect. And in my opinion, sometimes also is a dangerous effect, because we have seen many times this season crashes or are very close to crash just because you are in the strip. And then when you brake, when you normally brake, but you have no downforce due to the fact that you are following a rider, the bike doesn't stop. I remember in 2022 with Sylvain Guintoli about it. Sylvain, of course, was the test rider of MotoGP for Suzuki, but he was also racing superbike in the endurance. And he said that the difference between a superbike and a MotoGP bike in that condition is huge. It means it has to do with the aerodynamics. So probably I would try to. I don't believe sprint race can be useful for anything except make who is already a fan of MotoGP happy. But what MotoGP needs to do now is to attract the new fans, not to make happy the few we have already. So probably I would cancel the sprint race. I would try to give more relevance to the qualifying, because at the end of the day, now qualifying on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon already, everybody forgot who the hell is in pole. And nevertheless, the qualifying determined the grid of 2 races instead of 1. So
Yes. Yeah,
I think
yeah. So it's double important. Yeah.
so it's double important, and basically in terms of coverage is zero important. Seems to me a little bit strange, but to avoid speaking only about MotoGP, also Moto2, Moto3, to fit this new format, they canceled the warm-up. And I think this is totally crazy, because in Moto3 and Moto2, there are the youngest riders, the less expert mechanics. It means if a young rider crashes on Saturday afternoon qualifying, he will go racing without neither have the possibility to check a bike inside, except in the inside lap, in the warm-up lap. I think is something wrong.
That was interesting what you said about the sprint races, because a lot of riders have said they think that Formula One does a handful of them, don't they? And you know, doing them every weekend, they think is a bit too much. And
I mean, it's enough to look at how many injuries we had this season. No one single event with all the riders on track has never happened before, I guess.
That's it. You were speaking earlier about some of the people you worked with, of course, Preziosi and Nakamoto, Sahara-san. Do you still keep in touch with all those guys?
Basically, yes. With Filippo, you know, we shared such a long time and such a big experience, both in terms of job and life, because of course, when I met Filippo the first time was 1999, and he had this accident in end of 2000. So something that really changed his life. And I have a huge admiration for the way that Filippo is living with this disease. So I have a huge respect for Filippo. He's one of the most intelligent people I ever met, and also one of the stronger character I ever met, in terms of not a strong character, you know, in terms of never give up attitude. At the moment, he's doing a lot of things he likes. He has he goes skiing, he go doing scuba dive. He's doing, I mean, he's doing a life that is normal, you know what I mean? Even if, of course, for him it's much more difficult. So this increased a lot, again, my respect for him. With Nakamoto, we chat at least 1 or 2 times a month. Now, also Nakamoto is a good example. When he was 60 something already, I mean, a couple of years ago, so probably he was 16. Anyway, more than 60, he decided to open a tennis school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tennis is his passion, and so now he has a tennis school, and close to his home in Saitama. I've been there when I went last year in Motegi. I was one night with him, his wife, and what's the name of ex-Bridgestone, Yamada-san.
Yes.
You remember him? And
Yeah.
we had dinner and remember the old times. And then I stayed one night in Tokyo, and then I went the day after in Motegi. So with Nakamoto also we are friends. I mean, like with Filippo, and of course with Sahara-san is the one I've been working less together, only 1 year. But still I have a lot of respect for him. I know how much he was suffering for the situation, and how much passion he had for racing. And it's really a pity that people like Sahara-san is not anymore involved in MotoGP.
It is definitely, yeah. I mean, Livio, what about you looking forward to this year? I mean, are you still involved with the e-bikes? Have you know, you mentioned at the beginning that maybe you might not be in the paddock, or, I mean, but is there a chance that something could, would you be
I mean, no, for sure. I'm still involved with my e-bike company. In English is Thoki Bikes. If you know something about bicycle, you might know that since last year the market is in big trouble because after COVID there was a boom, a super boom, but it was very difficult to receive the bikes because of lack of components, like in the cars and everything. So basically, all the companies in the world, we order the bicycle thinking that the growth of the market was going on to the moon. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And then the war, the inflation, whatever. So since last year, there's in all Europe, let's say worldwide, an overstock of bicycle in the shops and in the distributors, and of course in the companies. So the market is much more difficult in 2022. But we are a small company, so for us it's a little bit easier to manage the situation. But sure, it's not an easy situation.
And speaking about electric, obviously there's Moto E, isn't there, in the championship? MotoGP is going to the non-fossil fuels. I mean, with your knowledge of these technologies, is what do you think is the long-term future for MotoGP?
I really hope not only for MotoGP that they will find a way to have not fossil fuel. It seems to me more and more that this European idea to go electric for the car industries is totally crazy.
Right.
I saw a few days ago an article in which they say that Hertz, the rent-a-car company, is selling 20,000 electric cars because it doesn't work, because nobody wants to rent an electric car. And I think, by the way, it's something only in Europe, and it's really difficult. Also, Volkswagen is reducing a lot of what they were thinking to do. So I think in this moment, the world is, Europe is, because in the other part of the world, they didn't care too much about it. But Europe is realized, maybe in China, because they have all the power. I mean, basically, they have a monopoly of the batteries. I cannot believe that in a short time, everybody will be electric in Europe.
Right.
And I hope this will allow the MotoGP, and Formula One as well, to remain with combustion engine. I mean, I've seen in reality both Formula E and Moto E. Okay, this season I will be 60, so I'm not young. But for me, the engagement for the rider or driver of a car, the sound of the engine is a big part, and the spectators the same. I still remember when my father brought me at Monza when I was, I think, 10 or 11 years ago to look at the practice of the Formula One. The sound of the 12-cylinder Ferrari was an animal, was not, 50 years ago. And this is something that remains inside of you. It's like the smell of a two-stroke bike. Of course, as everybody of my age, we start with a two-stroke bike. The smell of the two-stroke bike, I know, is very bad for the environment, but that was good. And all this kind of emotion with the electric vehicles, you miss it. Okay, you have a huge acceleration. Okay, but you cannot spend all your day doing it's 2 seconds. Who cares? And so I hope that MotoGP will remain with this kind of engine. Welcome to the not fossil fuel. This is something very positive and interesting. But as far as they will not find a solution for the battery that allows to have a very small and light batteries, I can't see a MotoGP being full electric. And anyway, even if they find the battery, I would not be happy to see it.
You and many others, I think, Livio. Livio, very interesting as always. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I hope we will see you somewhere at a racetrack around the world. I'm sure you'll be turning up somewhere. So yeah, thanks a lot, Livio.
Thank you. Good luck for the season. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.